Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're middle of the sixth chapter on page 86. 86 in this book. Good evening. The discussion tonight is following the beginning of this chapter where we spoke about the nature of the animal soul. And the animal soul is very complex, similar to the godly soul. They all have 10 qualities, 3 intellectual, 7 of character, of emotion. The difference is the godly soul has godly character, godly qualities, godly emotions. Emotions that motivate a person to doing good. Intellect that explains and gives to understand the person about godliness. And the animal soul's intellect is to justify itself. The animal soul's emotions motivate it to do selfish things and even sinful things. And now we're going to continue about the actions, the thought, the speech, the deeds that are coming and resulting from the animal soul. And he says, "V'hin kol hamasim asher nasim tachas hashemesh asher hakol hevel." Everything that's hot air, everything that's done under the sun that's meaningless, v'rois ruach, and a broken spirit, or an evil spirit, k'meshakasa b'zoya b'shalach, like it says in the Zohar, "Hein tfiru derucha." They're a broken spirit, broken energy. So now this word hevel, that all these daily things that most of us are doing most of the time are hot air. The Rebbe Rashab gives an illustration about how people look at stuff, at the things that they do, and they get all excited about, and really it's just hot air. So he illustrated like an animal, a dog for example, sees a bubble. So someone made a bubble. You know, kids play with bubbles. They're small bubbles. Today you can make big bubbles, very big bubbles. Then you can make smaller bubbles. So there are bubbles up in the air. Some kid made these bubbles. What's bubbles? So it's just water. It's just water full with air. It's a drop of water that's been turned into a bubble. And it's falling on a dog. What's the dog going to do? He's going to run away. Because the dog looks at the bubble, he thinks, oh, this is big. And something this big going to fall on me is going to hurt me. So he sees a bubble, he runs away. A human who sees a bubble coming at him is going to wait for the splash, or put his finger, poke the bubble. There's nothing there. Because the bubble was really air. It was empty. It was nothing. It pretended to be big, but this bigness was empty. That's why in Koheles they call all of these worldly affairs that people pursue, honor, wealth, it's hevel, it's hot air. Although it may be perceived and may give the image and present itself as something big. And not only sinful things, or what we call evil things, but even things that we speak about and think about and get excited about, and they're not for God. Anything that's not for God is hot air, which is an interesting concept in Kabbalah. Generally, in Judaism, they speak about what's mitzvah or godly, and what's sin or evil, And then there's neutral. There's things that are neutral. Things that are neutral is a steak. A steak is neutral. A kosher steak is still neutral. I guess it's kosher, but eating matzah on Pesach, that's not neutral. That's a mitzvah. You're supposed to eat matzah on Pesach. Shabbos meal is mitzvah. But just eating a steak because I want to have a good time to eat a steak, that's neutral. And then there's unkosher steak, which is not kosher, which is negative. But what about the kosher steak, or regular piece of steak, or playing basketball? It's neutral. Kabbalah Chassidus says everything is either here or there. There is no neutral. Which seems to be something that's very demanding and very intense, perhaps even too intense. You know, I don't want to do a mitzvah and I don't want to sin. I just want to relax. So what's the story? Why here we're saying in Tanya that anything that is not for Hashem is neither here nor there, is on the other side. We put everything in one big bag. There's the other side and this side. The side of holiness and the side of the other side, which is away from God. So this needs an explanation. And that's why he says, Shezehu Pirush Lashasitra Achara. The words of the Zohar is the other side. There's a side of holiness and the other side. They don't even want to say it's impure or tamei. They say it's the other side. There's us on the other side. So what about the things that are in the middle? Pirush tzad acher she'ein tzad kedusha. HaKedusha. If it's not holy, it's the other side. What is holy? Holy is what brings down the holiness of Hashem. The presence of Hashem. So let's understand this. What the Tanya is saying over here, a fundamental point in Hasidic literature and Kabbalah. To put it in more contemporary terminology, I would say, in words that we can relate to more. In life, you have a choice. Should it be meaningful or meaningless? Meaningless is hevel, is hot air. Is it meaningful or meaningless? What is the ultimate meaningful experience? Is godliness. Because there's nothing in existence that's more than godless. Like the Kabbalah calls him the Ein Sof. It's unlimited, it's sublime, it's the highest, it's the top, it's the most powerful, it's it. You want to have an experience of it that's connected with Hashem. It's connected with godliness. And if it's not, then it's hot air. It's meaningless. We have to ask the question, meaningful or meaningless? I must point out at this time, so what about, I want to play basketball, because I like to play basketball. Basketball playing is not meaningless, and it's not meaningful. Are you allowed to go to the gym? You gotta watch your eyes, but it's another story. Today's this kosher gyms. Sure. But that's another story. But gym, basketball. One could argue that it's not meaningful, it's not meaningless. And here Tanya says, no, there's nothing neutral. Either it's sacred, it's holy, or it's the other side. So the answer is, it depends why you're playing basketball, why you're working out. You can make it a meaningful experience. If you're working out to be healthy, so that you can learn Torah, so then you can make a living, and with the money, partly you're going to give for tzedakah, Then you're going to have a home, so with mezuzahs, and you'll be able to live a Jewish life. Your life in general is the presence of Hashem left in your life, then it's meaningful. Not only when you do mitzvahs, not only when you put on tefillin, but also when you play basketball, when you're making money, when you're relaxing, while you're relaxing. In the Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, it tells us that after it speaks about the laws of davening, it says after you daven, you should learn some Torah before you go to work. And then it says when you go to work, you have to remember, Kol Masecha Yiyu L'Shem Shamayim. Everything you do should be for the sake of heaven. B'chol D'rachecha De'eyu, in all your ways, your stuff, your basketball playing, your steak eating, know Hashem. You can know Hashem in the so-called neutral stuff by turning the neutral into something holy, by having in mind that the purpose of my exercise or my relaxing now is to be able to learn soon. The purpose of my recreation purpose, if it's a kosher recreation, is so that I'll be calm, have a clear head, so that I can learn. So then 24/7, the presence of Hashem is upon you. So that's what we have the choice. It is on the holy side or it's the other side. Is it meaningful or meaningless? Now what defines the holy side? So he says, Ein el hashra v'hamshacha mikdashasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu elam al davar shebatel etzlo yizbarach. Hashem dwells and His presence is felt on something and somebody who is bottled to Hashem. The word bottle is something very important. The word bottle, bitul, is one of the most fundamental principles in Hasidic literature. It's actually a term that's found in Hasidic literature. Although the idea is everywhere. The idea he actually brings this from a term that's found in Gemara and in Medrash. Shechina, the presence of Hashem. Hashra, Hamshacha, Mikdashas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How do you make Hashem's presence felt on you? Do I feel Hashem's presence? Do I act accordingly? Am I a personification of Hashem, of Hashem's will? Do I live Hashem's will? Am I an instrument for Hashem's presence? In order to do that, I have to have bittul. Bittul means I surrender myself to do Hashem's will. So I surrender myself to do Hashem's will because I want to be an instrument for Hashem's plan in the world, and that is the ultimate experience. The ultimate experience is where I can be part of Hashem's plan. It's much bigger than honor and pleasure and money, because honor, pleasure, and money is limited. What's the thrill of honor, pleasure, and money? Because it gives me that thrill. But if I think of Hashem as the source of all honor, He's the source of all money, He's the source of all pleasure, and I can get the original, the source of it all, by surrendering to become one with Hashem. To become one with Hashem, you have to surrender. You have to surrender your ego, firstly. Because your ego is where all your selfishness comes from. Ego is where all sin comes from. Ego is where your temper and your jealousy and all your mishagas comes from. And that's number one. It's not Hashem's will that you should act out on all your failings and faults. You may have it in you, but don't act out on it. Try to overcome your impulses. So that is done through surrendering yourself to Hashem. People who are addicts, Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things they say is you got to surrender yourself to a higher authority. But it's not just because I'm giving up, unconditional surrender, because you're a loser, you lost the war. By surrendering yourself to Hashem, you're not losing anything. You're really reaching your real life experience. So what is the side of, what is this side? The side of holiness, the side of godliness, the presence of Hashem in your home, in your heart, and in your life. It's the first thing you have to do is, am I ready to give up my mishigas? Am I ready to give up my ego? Now, it's not easy. It doesn't mean, okay, God, I'm writing you a check, here's my ego. If it only be that easy. But it's the will and the interest and the attitude and the effort. And then we can bring the presence of Hashem in our life, in our home, in our world. Do you have that capability? We all have that capability. You have that in you to be able to surrender, to give up. And he says something very interesting. What does it mean to surrender? He says, the angels, they completely surrender themselves to Hashem. They don't have an ego, they have no jealousy, they have no lust, they have nothing to them. What is an angel? It's just a servant to Hashem. There's nothing to the angel except that he's serving Hashem. What about man? So man, but a person has an ego, has a temper, and 99% of people are not what the Tanya calls a tzaddik. So they have the emotions that are similar to the emotions of a wicked, even a rasha, even a wicked person. So what's pshat? What are we saying over here? That he is a person who, a Jew, can be surrendered to Hashem. So he says, Bein b'koyach. Surrender means that you have in you the capability of surrendering. We're soon going to elaborate on that. K'chol ish Yisrael l'mata. Down here below, we're not angels. And we have stuff. We have ego. And we have all the faults. But we also have that capability. We have the capability of surrendering to Hashem. And the capability that we have to surrender to Hashem is not just a potential that's not there. Like he explains in Tanya later on, the capability that a Jew has to surrender to Hashem is in his programming, deep inside. So in other words, our original programming, the skeleton of our persona, is programmed to surrender to Hashem. But Hashem wanted life to be more interesting, or he wanted us to come to recognize meaning through struggle or through challenge. So therefore, our surrender to Hashem, our bittul, is not necessarily apparent, and certainly not all the time. But all the time we have this inner programming to surrender of bittul to Hashem. A Jew has in himself, every Jew, no matter what background he has, he has within him the programming to surrender his life to Hashem. And we found throughout history, Jews who were even distant from Yiddishkeit, when it came to the moment of truth, where they had to either give up their religion or their life, they gave up their life for Hashem. And in Tanya is going to elaborate later on in the 18th chapter that this is because deep inside we inherited from our ancestors, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that programming that a Yid would give up his life for God and for Judaism. So since we have that inside of us, therefore Hashem's presence is on us. If Hashem's presence is on us, that's because we have bittul to Hashem. We have that readiness within ourselves to surrender completely to Hashem, even with our mind. And this is important because this surrender, does it mean I'm giving up something? Like they say, well, you have to make sacrifices for Judaism. And once asked, I believe it was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, there's this person said, this kid is, my children, some of my children are not religious, they don't like Yiddishkeit. I can't understand why. I keep Shabbos, I go to shul, I do everything that's right. So the rabbi asked the man, tell me, do you ever complain? He said, what do you mean I complain? Listen, it's hard to be a Jew. For example, Shabbos, I have to take off, I could make more money, it's hard to be a Jew. Your children hear you say that? He says, yeah, Friday night. They think it's easy, today's kids. But it's not that way, it's hard to be a Jew. So the rabbi said, that's the problem. If the children are brought up with the idea that it's hard to be a Jew, so why should they want to be a Jew? Why should they want to be a Jew if it's hard to be a Jew? So therefore we have to understand that it's the attitude that we should have is not that it's hard to be a Jew. The attitude we should have is that is our real essence. That's the emphasis that Chassidus brings. This, what I mentioned before, that Hashem's presence is on the Jew. And we said before, even if 10 Jews are in one room, before they start davening, you have 1 million, there's 10 Jews in a room, the presence of the Shekhinah is already there. Why is the presence of Hashem in such a room? Close the door. Why is the presence of Hashem in such a room? The presence of Hashem is in such a room because there's 10 Jews over there, and they all have that in them, even though they're not necessarily acting out that desire to surrender to Hashem. They're not acting out that bittul. But it's in their programming. And that's why the secret of happiness for a Jew will always be living that life. It's living the life of the Yid. That's going to bring out their happiness. So when we say surrendering to Hashem, it doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for Hashem. It's not a sacrifice. A sacrifice means I'm giving away something of mine, and therefore I'm giving up on something. The true essence of a Jew is to be one with Hashem. The true essence of a Jew is to be an instrument for meaningful existence. So my body, my money, my home, my existence, when I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing according to my inner programming, that's my happiness, that's going to be my joy. And if I'm going to avoid that, that's why you have so many Jews by psychiatrists. There are probably more Jews by psychiatrists than there's not Jews. Why? Because they have more inner dynamics that they have to come to terms with. And if you're not going to keep Torah and mitzvahs, and if you're not going to do what's right, then you're not going to come to terms with that part of you. The surrender of a Yid to Hashem, that makes him into a something. The lack of surrender to Hashem, he is sacrificing his real inner identity and being. Even one person who's studying Torah, so he's actually acting out that he is now an instrument for Hashem, because when a Yid studies Torah, the presence of Hashem is on him. And like we learned in the previous chapters, Torah mitzvahs is like a garment to him. So godliness, he's surrounding himself with godliness. And if 10 Yidden are there, even though their surrender, their bittul is behind the scenes, is latent, nevertheless, it is still enough for the presence of the Shekhinah of Hashem to be there. Avol kol ma'sheina batlet lo yizbarach alu davar nifra. Now, somebody or something that is not ready to surrender, that is independent and separate from Hashem, will not receive vitality from Hashem's holiness. What is the reality? We have to ask ourselves, what is the reality of the world? What is our reality? What's reality? So you look at a table, you see a table, solid, it's a table. You look at walls, you see a ceiling. That's reality. Or is it? In high school, they taught us that matter equals energy. In high school, they taught us, you see this made of these and these elements. These elements are made up in molecules. And the molecules are atoms. And what's in the atoms? There's energy. It says neutrons, protons flowing around over there. So even though I don't feel any energy right now, but I just feel a solid leather watch, wristwatch here. And our high school teacher told us, but it's really deep inside. It's not what you see. That's misleading. What you really see, what's deep inside is an atom. An atom is just energy floating around. Millions, billions of atoms. And Kabbalah says, the deeper than the atom, and in the atom, there's godly energy. And one day, the scientists are going to say, boo, that's God. They're going to see it. That's what the previous Rabbi said. They're going to see in the lab the godly energy. That's Mashiach's times. So the real reality of existence is the divine energy that's everywhere. But this divine energy is concealed. So we look at a table and we see something solid, we don't see the divine energy within it. But the real reality, what's pulsating and giving existence to the world and to myself and to each one of us, the real reality is godliness. And the real reality is that godliness is everywhere and in everything. But then Hashem concealed it, so we should have free choice. So we should do mitzvahs. And that's the purpose of the creation of the world. And which is to reveal the godliness that's in there. And that's why we have to do mitzvahs, and that's when the presence of God is going to be revealed, if we're actually acting out of what's the real existence of the world. So when someone wants to separate himself from this inner reality, from the divine reality, he says, I'm not interested in God, I'm living for myself, I'm self-centered, I'm selfish, I have an ego, there's me. But if someone understands the Kabbalistic understanding of existence, that what is real existence is all God, so me and my flesh and my ego, everything is Hashem's. So and I'm really a personification of godly energy. So I have to be synchronized with Hashem's will and Hashem's presence. And that's when I'm on the right side. And if you tear away from that, you become nifrad. I'm something separate from the real reality. And Hashem gives us free choice, and we can't separate ourselves from the real reality. The real reality, from the inner reality. Then we're entering the dimension of meaninglessness. And that's what we said the choices. Is it meaningful existence or meaningless? And even if I'm in the gym, or when I'm trading or wheeling and dealing, and at that moment I am thinking that I am a Jew, and I have to wheel and deal because I have to have a house, and I have to invite guests, and I have to pay tuition, and I have to buy kosher food that's maybe more expensive, and I have to make a Shabbos, and how do you honor Shabbos with nice food, have it special, and before Yom Tov you're supposed to buy your wife a gift, and so this stuff. You're supposed to have a lot of kids. It's all mitzvahs. So therefore, but I have so much pressure. So I'm going to the gym, or I'm drinking beer, kosher, and I'm having enjoying myself. Why? It's to relax and to get my mood set to be a Jew to Jewish life. So if you do it l'shem shemayim, b'chol derech chodei, you do it for the purpose of Hashem. That's this side, because you are living and personifying the inner reality of existence. So that's the surrender we're talking about. Surrender your ego. You have the animal soul. This chapter deals with the animal soul. Can you surrender your animal soul's drives and motives and mishagas to the higher cause? Your godly soul doesn't surrender, because your godly soul, that's what it is. The godly soul is a fish of fresh water. But the animal soul wants to swim in the salt water. So we got to get the animal soul back into the fresh water, so it should be in sync with its godly soul. But someone who separates himself from the real existence, which is David, so although godly energy is giving him existence, but it's not existence that's coming from the holiness of Hashem per se. What do we mean? The inner holiness, from the inner side of godliness. The essence of Hashem is not in the unholy. When He gives vitality and existence to things that are on the other side, it's not from the inner essence of Hashem, it's from the backside. And this is a concept that's in Kabbalah a lot. There's Pchinas Ponim and Pchinas Achar. There's from the face. There's you want to receive everything from, so to say, the face of holiness, not from the backside of holiness. And the example is given. Let's say I have to pay you for work. You're an employee. So if I'm happy with you, say the boss calls you in, he has a check, he's smiling to you, he wants to pay you because, with a smile. But let's say he can't stand you because you're a pain in the neck, right? So you come in to get the check, he's busy over there, he turns around, he says, the check's on the table, right? Because you're a nudnik, and you're a negative thing, so he doesn't want to fire you, he has Rahmanas on you. But that means from the backside. Hashem gives existence to everything. Even when a person sins, he's getting vitality coming from Hashem. From Hashem. The question is are you part of Hashem's plan? Are you in sync with the divine plan and with the inner existence of everything? So then you're getting your sustenance from the face, the pneumius, the inner side, the real will of Hashem. But if you're doing against Hashem, Hashem is still going to give you existence because He has a purpose. He wants there to be free choice. So there's going to be sin, and there are going to be sinners, and evil is going to exist because Hashem conceals Himself, and we're going to elaborate it soon in the next few lines. But you have to understand that that's not His real intention. In Chassidus, I've seen this also in the Kabbalah literature, they give an interesting illustration of this. It's like a king who makes a banquet. He's making a banquet. Now this king is celebrating a big anniversary, a birthday, whatever, milestone. And this is going to be a banquet, the mother of all banquets. This is really going to be something special. And he wants the food to be super 5-star. Veal and duck and pigeon and whatever you want. Different courses, 10 courses, kosher caviar, everything you're going to have over there. All right? Because this is the king having his big party. So he's not just going to give, some sardines. He's going to give them like a king, befitting a king having a milestone. Now, who's going to enjoy that? Who do you think is going to enjoy all this food? The king and his guests. They're going to have a feast. So they're going to have this steak and this veal and the caviar and all the stuff, right? It's great. You know who else is going to be eating caviar that night? The servants in the kitchen. Not because they're going to steal, but because they're going to be leftovers. And the king says, whatever's left over you can have. But how much could the guests eat? So after the fish, they're going to take off the caviar dishes. It's glad kosher meal, probably, no? So they're going to take off the caviar, and then the caviar comes to the kitchen. So the servants are filling themselves with caviar. And then who else? What about the all the duck and the pigeon and the whatever, right? Who's going to enjoy it? The servants. Is the party for the servants? No. Party's for the guests, for the king. But the servants are also going to enjoy it. You know who else is going to enjoy a good meal that night and the next 2 days? A lot of food is going to go to the garbage, right? The dogs and the stray cats and the rats are going to have a party in the back with the garbage. So there's going to be all the stray animals are going to be partying on caviar and the veal and all that stuff. So let's ask ourselves a question. Is that why the king is making a party? So the stray dogs and cats should have veal and duck and pigeon leftovers? No. But once he's giving a party, the king needs servants, so the servants are going to have it as a byproduct. By the way, there's going to be food for the servants. Similarly, Hashem created a world. And in the world, there's the purpose. The real purpose of creating the world is so that people should do good. So Yidden should take mitzvahs and the Goyim should live a civilized life. So there's a purpose for the world. But he wants people to earn their goodness, to choose their goodness, to choose doing mitzvahs. So he created other stuff out there. So really the whole other stuff are distractions, so a person should make choices in life. So he's also giving vitality to everything. And there's also negativity, and there's animals, and there's disease. It's all part of Hashem's big plan that people should have choices, and they should choose Hashem out of choices. So they're all getting vitality. But there is receiving from Hashem from the face, and there's receiving Hashem from behind you. So Hashem has desire and his real inner purpose for giving existence, for sustaining the world, is for the good that's happening in the world. But since this world has to be by choice, there also has to be a possibility for evil. So therefore Hashem conceals his godliness in the existence of the world. But those things are just b'chinas acharayim. They're from the backside, from behind. They're getting all from Hashem, but it's from behind. So we have to make a choice. Do we want Hashem to face us, so to say, when he gives us blessing? and gives us life? Or do we want Hashem to give us life? Yeah, you're around, I gotta feed you too. You know, you're just stray. A stray dog is free, you know that. He has no collar, he comes and goes when he wants. He has no master. Some people, they're running around like stray dogs. They have no master. So, but they're eating from the garbage. They're eating. You don't see hungry dogs here in America. Years ago, there used to be hungry dogs. They used to describe a hungry dog. In the Talmud, they say, hungry like a dog. In America, you don't see hungry dogs much because there's so much garbage, right? Except in Manhattan, when you go on the avenue, there's a lot of restaurants. The dogs and the cats are overweight. They have no master. They do what they want. So we have to ask ourselves, do I want to have bittul and accept Hashem in my existence and surrender my animal soul so that my godly soul clicks with Hashem, which is my real essence, and I'm bringing Hashem into my world and in my existence and purpose and meaning. So that's the holy side of holiness. Or you want sitra achara, you want the other side. But then the big question: how does evil exist? How does the evil come from? Where do the stray dogs in this world come from, so to say? Some people who are like that, or evil that's going on. So sheyardim madrega, is there are tens of thousands of levels from the essence of Hashem. There's Hashem, His essence, so to say, the face of Hashem. That's where we're really at. If I want to know you, I look you in the face, and I hear from you wisdom. I can see if you're refined or not. It's in the face. So if I want a teacher, the Gemara says that if a student who faces his teacher is going to learn more than a student who doesn't have a seat in front of the teacher, he has to have a seat behind the teacher. But in the face, that's where the real energy and the real communication comes from. So what's your relationship with him? The face, or it's behind. And over here in the sense, not just sitting behind the teacher wants to teach one who's behind him also. I'm talking about who he gives reluctantly. That's because Hashem made a chain of levels from the godliness to the most profane, to places of sin. And the lower it goes, the more materialistic it is, the less of godliness is apparent. That's why in this world you can't see the godliness. The higher worlds were the angels feel godliness. Also the angels, although the angels were created by Hashem, but they're more refined, and they're in sync with godliness, because godliness is revealed over there. But there was a chain, a shtalshlus, and a descendant order of descending lower and lower, and each level that descends lower, the godliness is more concealed, so he can create beings that do not feel godliness until the beings of this world, where godliness is so concealed that it's an effort to find godliness. It's an effort to live in sync with godliness. That's the animal soul. The animal soul covers up on our godly soul. We don't naturally feel godliness. Wake up in the morning. We don't naturally feel that I have to eat kosher and not kosher. It's not a natural thing. Our godly soul feels it, but it's all covered and concealed by the animal soul. And everything so in existence, the whole physical world. Shtalshlim is that levels of condensing. This is called in Kabbalah tzimtzum, where the godliness becomes in lower form. It becomes so minimized, the level of godliness, the intensity of the godliness, and the godliness is so concealed that even something that is separate from Hashem could continue to exist. And it's as if God is giving up His control, as if Hashem is in exile, the term that we find even in Gemara, in Medrash, but certainly the Kabbalah talks about it. God is in exile where there is sin. He doesn't want a place where there is sin. But he gives vitality to sinners and sin because he wants everyone to choose. And you're going to see a sinner, he's there and he exists. He didn't turn into a puff, into nothing because he sinned. Even though when he sinned, he disconnects from Hashem. So if he disconnects from Hashem, he should be less, he should lose his existence theoretically. So why is he continues to exist? Because this is also part of the exile. It's as if Hashem put himself in exile so that there could be existence. So there could be existence of things that are foreign and separate from Hashem. Again, the word nifrad. These are the choices. Do you want to be bottled to Hashem? Or you want to be connect with Hashem? Or you want to be separate from Hashem? So therefore, Hashem had a plan, and the godliness descended from level to level to mainly yes. Really, if someone, existence is only the vitality of Hashem. And if Hashem would remove himself for 1 second, it would cease to exist. But Hashem concealed himself that they can continue to exist. That's why this world and everything that's in this world is given a title. The Kabbalah calls this the world of the shell and the other side. So this physical world, where there's so much evil and there's so much sin, is the world and the dimension where godless is most concealed, where it's not apparent at all. So that's why this world is called the world of the shell. Like we found in Kabbalah, in the earlier chapters of Tanya, there's the fruit and there's the shell. It's one item, but the fruit is edible, and the shell is not edible. The shell is to be discarded, but you need the shell for a purpose to protect the fruit. Similarly, Hashem made a world, and he made goodness and kindness, that's the fruit, but he put a shell around it so that the goodness should be by choice. But a person who doesn't have the insight to look past the shell will throw away a coconut. It's just hard. I tried to bite into a coconut, I broke my teeth. But you're not looking into it. So this world is called the world of the shell, of Klippa, and of the other side, because the godliness is not apparent. And that's why the Kabbalah, the Eitz Chaim, says that this world life is difficult, and there's a lot of evil, and the wicked prosper, and the wicked prevail. Why does evil prevail? Why is it so evil in this world? That's because this world is the world of the other side. Because the godliness is so hidden that you really have to have the wisdom and the insight to look past the coconut and understand that deep inside the coconut there's the fruit and the juice. And the same thing is you have to look at this physical world, especially in Nur Chassidus, that you see this physical world. You understand that Kabbalah teaches us there's godly energy in this world. But I don't see it before me. It's because it's concealed. Because the energy was diminished and diminished and diminished and held back and put in this big shell which is dynamic, with temptation, with ego, with lust, with jealousy, and all the mishagas that distract us. All of that is part of why this world is a world which is full of evil, and why life is hard, if it would be a real where godliness would be apparent, so it would be like the world before the sin of Adam and Eve, before the sin of Adam and Chava. So it was a perfect world. So it was good. So people didn't die. Adam and Chava was supposed to live forever, because that's a world of goodness. But because of his sin, the world changed. And because of the sins of the later generations, the presence of the Shekhinah was removed even more. And that's the world we're living in. We're living in a physical world which the godliness is not apparent. And that's why it's difficult and challenging and so on. Then he says, so therefore this is the choice we have to make. And this brings back to our choices. If we do what's good and what's right, that's the ultimate of meaningful experience. Because that's the real existence of the world. The real purpose of the creation of the world is a world that is godly and therefore meaningful. You cannot think of a more meaningful experience than being godly. There's no more meaningful experience than taking the physical world and returning it to its true and revealing its true essence and its true existence. And that's the challenge we all have to have every day and every moment. Do we want to connect ourselves and connect our world, which we are in control of, the part of the world which we're in control of, to reveal the godliness in it, and to bring the presence of the Shekhinah on us? And therefore it means we have to surrender our ego, we have to surrender the desires of the animal soul, and then the animal soul with the physical world becomes also an instrument. Our animal soul becomes an instrument. Animal enjoys the physical life. But if the physical life and the exercise we do, even with our animal soul, is l'shem shamayim, then there's purpose and meaning. Then we are an instrument for Hashem, an instrument for bringing the world to its true purpose and meaning. And if not, just wasting our life in meaningless experiences, so then it's all empty. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.